possible? If we had any information that led that way and we felt that we could provide anything with the public, we would have done that. We would have got that information out. We're working very closely with the family, and we will pursue every avenue. But again, I'm not going to make any specific comments, but anything that would point towards that, we would immediately take steps to address things that need to be addressed.
So, but you don't believe the children are alive anymore?
No. Based on the experts and the review of the facts, the inclement weather, the time frames, and their age, the likelihood that they're alive right now is very low.
So I've spent countless hours over the last couple of weeks editing audio of Darren Geddes speaking on various people's channels. I've gone through and removed all the chatter from the hosts, and I've gone through and removed all the swearing. And then a few days ago, I decided I was going to create a abridged version where I removed all the BS, all the times where he made comments like, "I'm 1,000% certain," or "this is ironclad," all those things that he said trying to convince people, and just go with the solid statements that he made. So I really have put a lot of work into the audio of Dingbat Geddes. But I've just decided to delete the lot. The reason for that being that even though most people have now come to the realisation that the guy is a complete utter fraudster, that he came forward basically to push a narrative in favour of Daniel, and I also suspect that he was also trying to help Logan get custody of Meadow. But all he does throughout is lie and make things up. It's like he thinks he's in his own little 60s cop show. It actually sounds like it's some sort of fantasy for him, that he thinks he's this hero cop who's out there doing his own investigation and he's reporting to the public on what he's finding in his investigation. But the thing is, there are still people who believe this stuff that he's come out with, even though it has now been definitively proven that this guy is a complete utter liar. So I realised that me putting out edited audio from him, even if I started with a disclaimer at the beginning, pointing out that this has all been proven wrong, pointing out that I don't in any way support this guy or endorse what he's saying, that there's still going to be people who are going to listen to it. They're going to forget what I've said at the beginning. And then we're going to have another surge of people regurgitating the same drivel in people's comments section and in people's chats. So I realised it was the better option to steer completely clear of all Darren Geddes' audio. So from the very beginning, RCMP have come out and said outright that there is no evidence of an abduction, but that if there was, then they would basically cross that bridge when they got to it. If they had come across evidence of an abduction, then you can bet that there would be an Amber Alert out now, or the children would have been located. But there is no Amber Alert. There's been no media release from the RCMP saying, "We've just discovered it's an abduction." Now, one of the arguments I keep hearing from people is that, well, no, it's not classified as an abduction because Malaya organised for someone to take them for her. So to those people, do your research. If you have a look at some of the Amber Alerts that are out there, or past Amber Alerts, you will see that some of those have been classified as abductions when these children have been removed from their home or from their main custodian by a parent, a relative, someone they know, someone who legally is not allowed to have custody of the child. A person being known to the children does not negate the classification of abduction. So when RCMP say there's no sign of an abduction, they are also referring to scenarios of people that the children know having removed them. So no, Malaya did not take the children down to the end of the driveway and put them in a car and have someone drive off with them. Trust me, if that had been the situation, the children would have been found by now by the RCMP, or at the very least there would be an Amber Alert out, and Malaya would probably be locked up. So there are people who are determined to cling on to this idea that the children were abducted, even down to the point of quoting Malaya and Daniel. Well, Malaya said that she wanted an Amber Alert. Daniel said he wanted them to check the borders. But honestly, these are two people who were on the property when the children went missing. Two people whose stories have changed, who have contradicted themselves, who have very clearly lied. Comments by people who essentially are suspects are really not proof of anything. If you take a look at past missing children's cases where it has turned out that the custodians were responsible, you will see that more often than not, these people have put forward the idea that the child was abducted. So someone put a comment in one of my videos the other day questioning how it is possible to say there is no sign of an abduction. Essentially saying, well, couldn't they have been abducted and there be no sign of that? The typical argument of, well, just because they say there's no evidence of an abduction doesn't mean there wasn't one. So I thought it was about time that somebody put a video out basically explaining how it is that the RCMP do actually rule out the possibility of an abduction. Okay, so let's start with witness sightings. Had there been any credible witness sightings, one of two things would have occurred. So, if the RCMP are able to identify a vehicle from a witness account based on the information they've been given, using camera footage, etc., and that they therefore have a plate number, then they are going to issue an Amber Alert. Now, if they've been given a description of a vehicle but they haven't identified the specific vehicle, like for example this gold car that we hear about in the documents, then they would have come out to the public and first of all asked for the driver of this gold sedan to make contact with them to help with their investigations, and failing that, they would have asked the public to come forward and report any sightings of this gold vehicle. Now, I'm using the gold vehicle as an example, but it's pretty clear when you look at the descriptions that it is not a reliable sighting. None of the descriptions match. And, being realistic, given the amount of time that has passed since that report was made, if that was considered to be a legitimate sighting, then by now there would be an Amber Alert out, or there would have been a call to the public for their help, or the children would have been recovered. Now, I can't tell you why they decided to put that particular sighting in those documents, but I can tell you this, they would have taken a look at it, they would have said, none of this matches, and rather quickly filed it away. Now, had they decided to look into the individual who was reporting it, I strongly suspect that they would find that that person connects to Darren Geddes. In fact, there is an individual who connects to Darren's son, who doesn't quite have the same name, but it's pretty damn close. Okay, so moving on to camera footage. Now, obviously, by the time they decided that actually the children didn't wander off into the woods and they needed to have a closer look at other scenarios, by that point in time, any tyre tracks that may have been on the road from a possible abduction would no longer be visible because of all the vehicles that had been in the area. Even looking at the entrance to the road, that dirt road that goes up to where Janie walked up to and met Daniel, I know that's closed off, but looking to see if there had been any vehicles parked in that spot wouldn't be feasible because there would have been search vehicles parked there. So, in terms of a physical examination for any tyre tracks that don't belong, not a possibility. However, they had drones and helicopters up within an hour of the children being reported missing. And those drones and helicopters would have had camera footage. So they will have gone back over footage from the helicopters and the drones to take a look at those locations on the road, like beside the house or at the entrance to that dirt road, to see if there was any evidence of a vehicle having pulled over and stopped on the road near the house or near that side road. When you have a case like this one, where it becomes apparent by the second day or so that actually things aren't quite right, then they are going to have a close look at the footage from their helicopters and drones. Not just for any sign of the children, but for a sign of any suspicious activity in the area. So when they're telling you that there's no sign of an abduction, you know that they will have also checked the footage from their drones and helicopters to see if there's any evidence of a vehicle having stopped next to the property or gone into the entrance of the driveway or stopped at the beginning of that dirt road that Janie talks about. You know also that they're going to canvass all the neighbours and talk to them about, have you seen any suspicious vehicles? Have you heard anything that sounded a little bit unusual? And we know that there was that account from one of the neighbours who heard a 5-speed vehicle making trips back and forth on the night before the children were reported missing. Okay, so let's talk about geofencing. So I know a lot of people have come out and said, oh, well, they wouldn't know if there was anyone there because there's no phone reception there. But that's not correct. There is patchy phone reception. We have one account from Belinda that if you stand on one spot in the driveway at 1407, that you get phone reception. We have an account from Janie that if you go along to Lansdowne Road, you get phone reception. And then if you go the other way, and she said it's something like 500 yards or something, you get phone reception. There is enough phone reception to allow for geofencing, and you can bet that they did that. So they would have looked for devices that didn't belong, devices that hadn't previously been in the area or devices that did not return to the area. They would be the focus of their investigation. So aside from looking at these devices that may not normally appear in the area or that did not appear again, they're also going to have a look at local devices. Now, obviously, they're not going to be able to say, hey, this person was driving along the road at this time because of the patchy reception. But what they are going to do is they're going to look at where phones drop in and out of cell reception, and they're going to make note of the times, because that is likely to indicate that that phone was on the move at the time. So basically any local phones that they identify as having been moving at the right times, they're going to look into them. So there is actually quite a lot that they can do in terms of geofencing and in terms of digital forensics. So going back to any phones that don't actually belong in the area, they're going to track those phones. We had a case in Australia several years ago where a little girl was abducted from a campground in Western Australia. And what the police did in terms of how they tracked down the guy that abducted her, his phone blipped off one of the towers just outside of the campground as he was leaving the campground. They were able to then track the movement of his phone back to Carnarvon, which is the town where he lived, and back to his house. They were able to establish the fact that the child was there, having traced him from the campground back to the house. So they traced his movements so they could prove that he was there in the location, and he had no reason to be in the location. And then about 18 days after she'd been abducted, they waited for him to leave the premises and they arrested him, and then they went in and they rescued the little girl. So yes, if they did identify any devices that didn't belong in the area, first of all they would figure out who those devices belonged to and, provided, of course, that they weren't burner phones, but they would also then track the direction of those devices through other towers. So had they identified any suspicious devices, then, what are we, nearly 5 months in? By now, we would have heard about it. They would have tracked that device down, and we would quite likely have a resolution. Or at the very least, we would have an Amber Alert with a description of a vehicle, because obviously if they can track the device, they can track the direction, and they can actually narrow down a vehicle using cameras and coordinating that with cell pings, basically. Okay, so let's talk about surveillance cameras and tag readers. So if you go back and listen to the dispatch audio, you'll hear one part where they identified some trail cameras pretty early on. It was either the first day or the second day, and they were basically going to track down the owners of those cameras. And even though it took them a little while to do it, they did also go back and request more trail cam footage from other locals. So we know that they have collected trail cam footage on top of everything else. While it seems unlikely that there's going to have been a great number of ring cameras in the area, the other thing that they would have done would have been to locate businesses on routes that would be leaving the location. Businesses that would be likely to have CCTV footage. They would also look at traffic light cameras in the area. They would retrieve all that video footage. Now, there's software available that is used to go through that sort of CCTV footage, traffic light cameras, etc., way, way faster than what people can do. It processes it very, very quickly. You basically have to tell it what you're searching for, and it will bring up all those images for you. So you can bet that they have gone through camera footage of the area. And yeah, there may not be a lot of camera footage from Gairloch Road, although we know that it sounds like there was at least one trail cam that faced onto the road. But we know that they're going to have reviewed camera footage wherever possible. Now, apparently not every RCMP vehicle has a tag reader. That is something that they're still rolling out by the sounds of it. But if there happen to have been vehicles in the area with tag readers, then they would be looking at what vehicles were caught on those tag readers. And don't scoff at that. You just have to look at the Madeline Soto case. They managed to discover that Stephen Stearns had gone back down to his parents' place because of catching the car that he was driving on a tag reader. It was also unfortunate for him that there had been a motor vehicle accident just near his parents' place, and I think it was a dash cam from one of the police cars also caught the vehicle on camera. But the point here is that they are going to look at all these technologies. So there's a lot of technology that they will have used to see if there was a possibility of an abduction. There's a lot of investigative strategies that they would have used to rule out the possibility of an abduction. So when they say there is no sign of an abduction, they're not just saying, oh, well, we didn't see any man standing on the corner going, I abducted these children. You can bet that they really did investigate. They would have used the resources available to them to rule out that possibility. So in terms of this notion of, well, how can they know that there definitely wasn't an abduction? What if there was no evidence, but someone did abduct the children? There would be evidence. There are so many different avenues that they can pursue that if these children had been abducted, they would have known about it. It is a pretty bold thing for the RCMP to have come out so early in this case and say there's no sign of an abduction. And I've said this so many times, but it seems like a lot of people still don't want to hear it. When they are coming out that early in the case and saying there's no sign of an abduction, when they are scaling back the search after only 6 days, then no matter how you look at it, it is a criminal investigation.
I don't get to see Meadow. I already asked CPS about seeing Meadow, and that's all they say to me is due to the criminal investigations.
I know that people would like to hold on to the idea that these children are safe and happy, eating ice cream in someone's living room somewhere. But everything points to the fact that this is not the case. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. And of course also please hit that like button and leave a comment below. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.